Some years ago, a grade 5 teacher asked his students for homework, for them to come up with what God is like analogy using only TV commercials. And this is what they came up with. God is like a Bayer's aspirin. He works miracles. God is like Ford. He's got a better idea. God is like Coke. He's the real thing. God is like a Hallmark card. He cares enough to send the very best. God is like Tide. He gets the stain out that others leave behind. God is like General Electric. He brings good things to life. God is like Sears. He has everything. God is like a Scotch tape. You can't see him, but you know he's there. God is like Delta. He's ready when you are. God is like City TV. He's everywhere. God is like Allstate. You're in good hands with him. And God is like VO5 hairspray. He holds through all kinds of weather. Trying to understand the Holy Trinity is an impossible task. It's beyond our capacity to understand. In the words of St. Augustine of Hippo, who once said, "If we can understand God, then he is not God." There will always remain with us an element of mystery. That is, a mystery to be embraced and not to be solved. For me to get to the point, allow me to use a few examples. I've been told that according to a string theory, there are 10 dimensions in the universe. Each time you add a dimension, your perception of reality changes. It gets more complicated. When you have one dimension, you have just a single line. All you can do is measure an object. When you add one more dimension, now you have height and width. Now you have a stick man. And when you add a third dimension, you now have height, width, and depth. With the 3D, you can now draw a realistic portrait of a person, even architectural drawing for a building. When you add the fourth dimension, now you add time. Well, after the fourth dimension, it just got way too complicated for me to understand this string theory. In the same way, let's think about different levels of beings that live on Earth. On this lowest level of existence are vegetables. There's not much to them other than they exist. Then we have animals. Animals have intelligence and they can communicate with each other in their limited capacity. They most often act according to their wild instincts, however. But when it comes to humans, not only are we more intelligent than the animals, but being made in the image and likeness of God, we have a capacity for a spiritual life. We are capable of having a relationship with God. So, as you can see, there's a huge gap between different levels of beings. Vegetables cannot fully comprehend animals. And there's just no way animals, and our pets included, can fully comprehend us humans and our thoughts. In the same way, we cannot fully comprehend God, his thoughts, nor his ways. So it would be accurate to say that we know God, and what we know about God, we know according to our limited human intellectual capacity. In other words, we know God, but there's a lot we don't know about God, simply because God is beyond our capacity to know and to understand. For everything we know, we need to have a frame of reference. So when it comes to God and the heavenly realities, we have a hard time understanding love so perfect. It unites three persons of the most holy Trinity into perfect unity, perfect oneness. We have never experienced life without the possibility of death, love without possibility of hatred and indifference, happiness and joy without sadness and despair, peace without harmony, peace and harmony without war. Whatever we possess in this life, we possess them only imperfectly and temporarily. When we get to heaven, then and only then will we come to know through God love, peace, and joy in their perfect form and possess them eternally. Even though we cannot fully comprehend God, that's okay. What's the most important thing is that this almighty and all-knowing God created all of us out of his love. and has sent us His only begotten Son to save us from our sin and death. This God invites all of us to live with Him forever and ever in His heavenly kingdom. I remember hearing a story about this little boy who was always fascinated with airplanes. So he asked his dad one time, pointing to an airplane flying over their heads in the sky, "Dad, how big is that airplane?" With a smile, Dad responded with the question, "Well, how big do you think that is?" And the boy shrugged his shoulders and he goes, "I don't know. It's got to be quite tiny because I can barely see it." So Dad took him near the airport where they could see airplanes take off and land. And when an airplane just flew over their heads and landing, Dad told his son, "Now do you see how big the airplane is?" Feeling excited, the boy said, "Wow, that airplane is huge." What is true of airplane is also true of God. An airplane looks small from a distance, but up close you realize just how big it is. Same thing with God. The closer you are to God, the bigger and greater God will be in your life. So how big is God in your life? It depends on how close you are to God.